Maya was a quiet, introspective woman in her mid-30s, working as a software developer at a tech company in the heart of the city. She had always been the type to keep to herself, focusing on her work rather than socializing with her colleagues. Unlike most of the team, who thrived on casual chatter and lunchtime banter, Maya found solace in her solitude. She was good at what she did, coding, debugging, and solving complex problems, but the office environment felt more like a social club than a workplace. She would arrive early, get settled at her desk, and immerse herself in her tasks, rarely engaging in the daily office gossip or the frequent after-hours happy hours that her coworkers seemed to love. It wasn't that she didn't like people, rather, she felt overwhelmed by the need to interact when all she wanted was to focus on her work. But over time, this difference started to make her feel more and more isolated. As her colleagues bonded over their shared stories and jokes, Maya remained a quiet observer. Despite her silence, she excelled in her role. Her performance was impeccable, projects were completed on time, her code was flawless, and her problem-solving skills were unmatched. But in a company that prided itself on collaboration and communication, Maya's quiet nature became a point of concern. She felt overlooked, not because of her abilities, but because she didn't fit the mold of what her company valued most: sociability. Still, Maya kept to her routine, determined to prove that her worth didn't need to be measured by how much she talked, but by how much she contributed. Little did she know, her world at the office was about to change in a way she never saw coming. The morning had started like any other. Maya walked into the office, her usual quiet routine already in place. She greeted no one, though her presence was acknowledged with half-hearted waves from her colleagues. She set her things down at her desk and immediately logged into her computer, focusing on the tasks for the day. The soft hum of the office surrounded her, the low murmur of conversations from the open plan work area, the tap of keyboards, the occasional laugh that echoed through the space. Maya felt disconnected from it all, but that was nothing new. It had always been this way. By mid-morning, she received an unexpected email. It was an invitation to meet with her manager, Angela, in the conference room. No context, no explanation, just an invitation with a cold formality that made her stomach knot. Maya's heart started to race. It wasn't unusual for managers to schedule one-on-ones, but this felt different. There was an underlying tension in the air that she couldn't quite shake. When Maya walked into the conference room, Angela and Steve, the HR manager, were already seated at the table. They both gave her stiff, forced smiles. Angela motioned for her to sit down across from them, and Maya did so cautiously, her mind already spinning with questions. "Hi, Maya. Thanks for joining us," Angela said, her tone overly polite but lacking warmth. Maya nodded silently, her eyes flicking between the two of them. Steve cleared his throat and began, his voice low and official. "Maya, we've been reviewing your performance here at the company, and we need to have a candid conversation. We've noticed that your interactions with the team have been limited, and there are concerns that your lack of communication is affecting team dynamics." Maya felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her composure. She had always known her quiet nature was seen as a weakness in the office, but hearing it stated so plainly, especially by HR, stung more than she had anticipated. Angela continued, her voice tinged with a trace of concern. "Maya, we understand you're an excellent coder. Your technical skills are not in question. But in a company like ours, where collaboration and team synergy are crucial, your silence has become a problem. We've tried to encourage you to engage more, but it hasn't improved. This isn't just about getting the job done, it's about being part of the team." Maya opened her mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. She had always thought that her work should speak for itself. She had believed that if she just focused on her tasks, her results would show her value. But clearly, that wasn't enough for them. "We've made the decision to let you go," Steve said bluntly. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "Wait." What Maya blinked, her mind struggling to process what was happening. "You're firing me." "Because I'm quiet." Angela's face remained impassive. "It's not just about being quiet. Maya, It's about being part of the company culture. We need people who can communicate, collaborate, and integrate with the team. It's not personal. It's just how things are here. Maya felt a cold rush of shock flood over her. She had worked so hard to prove herself, to be indispensable with her technical skills. But now she was being dismissed for something she couldn't change about herself. She was being judged for being different. She had always known her quiet nature set her apart, but she never thought it would cost her her job. This is unfair. She finally found her voice, her throat tight with emotion. I've done everything you've asked. I've met deadlines. I've solved problems. I've worked through challenges. How is that not enough? Steve shook his head. It's not about what you've done, Maya. It's about the culture we're trying to build here. We need people who can communicate freely, who are active participants in discussions. It's not a fit, and we can't continue with your current role. The words felt like a blur. Maya was struggling to breathe, the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. She had never felt more alone than she did in that moment. Her head spun as she tried to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't the end she had imagined. Angela handed Maya a folder with the details of her termination, her face sympathetic but detached. We'll provide you with severance and assistance in transitioning to another role, but your time here is finished. Maya stood up slowly, her hands shaking as she reached for her belongings. She felt numb. I don't know what to say, she muttered, the words barely escaping her lips. As she walked out of the conference room, her coworkers in the open office barely took notice. No one asked if she was okay. No one seemed to care. The familiar hum of the office felt foreign now, a reminder of everything she had lost. Maya's mind was in turmoil. She had been fired for something she couldn't control. It wasn't her work, her performance, or even her skills that had failed her. It was who she was. And now, as she packed up her desk and walked out of the building, she couldn't shake the feeling that her quiet nature had somehow been a flaw all along. Just as she reached the lobby, a figure entered the building, an older man with a purposeful stride, his eyes scanning the room as if he were looking for someone. The moment he saw her, he stepped forward, his gaze intense and focused. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Are you Maya?" Maya stepped out of the elevator, her heart still heavy from the abrupt meeting with Angela and Steve. The sterile hum of the office building felt suffocating now, a world she no longer belonged to. She walked slowly toward the exit, her mind clouded with confusion, anger, and disbelief. The weight of the termination letter in her bag felt like a cruel reminder that her quiet nature, the very thing that had always set her apart, had now led to her downfall. Her eyes were focused on the ground as she made her way through the lobby. She could hear the buzz of conversations behind her, the chatter of coworkers who still didn't know what had just happened to her, the ringing of phones, the sounds of people busy with their daily tasks. No one paid attention to her as she walked past the front desk. She didn't expect them to. It had always been like this for Maya, quiet, unnoticed, blending into the background. But now, it felt like an empty existence. As she pushed open the revolving door to leave, she caught sight of a man standing near the entrance. He was tall, with graying hair and an air of calm confidence about him. His suit was well-tailored, his posture straight and purposeful. He looked like someone who was used to being noticed. Yet there was something about his gaze that felt different, as if he wasn't just scanning the room like a businessman might, but rather looking for something or someone specific. Maya didn't think much of it at first, her mind preoccupied with the events that had just unfolded. But then she heard his voice calling her name. Maya? She froze mid-step. She didn't recognize the voice. It was deep and steady, but there was something strangely familiar about it. Something that made her look up despite herself. The man's eyes met hers, and a strange sense of recognition stirred within her, though she couldn't place him. He wasn't someone she had seen around the office. She opened her mouth to ask who he was, but before she could, he spoke again. "I'm sorry to bother you," he began, stepping closer, his expression warm yet determined. "But I've been looking for you. I know this might sound strange, but I need to talk to you. It's important." Maya felt a knot form in her stomach. She hadn't been expecting this. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hesitant, guarded. She had never been the type to trust easily, especially not after everything that had just happened. The man smiled gently, as if he could sense her discomfort. "My name is Daniel. I've been following your work for a while now. I know this might be a bit of a surprise, but I came here today specifically to find you. I have a proposition." Maya narrowed her eyes, still unsure whether this was some kind of joke. Was he just some eccentric stranger? Or was there something more to this? "I don't understand," she replied, her voice soft. "Why would you be looking for me? I don't even know you." Daniel's smile faded slightly, but his expression remained earnest. "I've been following your contributions to the tech community, your coding work, and your expertise. You may not know it, but you've been recommended to me by several people. I've seen what you can do, Maya, and I believe you have a lot more potential than you realize." Her brow furrowed as she processed his words. This stranger was speaking to her as though he knew her work, her abilities, even though she had never met him before. She was taken aback. It had been years since anyone had shown that kind of genuine interest in her, beyond the bare minimum. Her technical skills were her lifeline, the one thing that kept her going. But she had never received this kind of acknowledgement outside of her immediate team. "I'm flattered, I guess," Maya said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But why now? Why after everything that's happened today?" Daniel's eyes softened, as if he understood the storm raging inside her. "I know you're confused, and I'm sorry for intruding on such a personal moment. But I heard what happened. I heard about your firing, and I want you to know that it wasn't about you. It wasn't about your abilities or your work ethic. It was about something else entirely, something that you don't need to change. Maya, in fact, it's exactly what I'm looking for." Maya blinked, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity flooding her. She couldn't understand what he was trying to say. What could this stranger possibly know about her situation? She was a quiet woman, so quiet, apparently, that she'd lost her job. There was nothing extraordinary about her, at least not in the way people often talked about success in the workplace. But Daniel seemed to be saying otherwise. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel took a step closer, lowering his voice as if to speak only to her. "Maya, I run a startup, a small but growing one. We don't need people who fit into a mold. We need people who think differently, people who don't conform to the typical expectations, people who are quiet but powerful in their own way. I'm not interested in hiring a team player who constantly talks over everyone else. I want someone who works thoughtfully, someone who listens more than they speak, someone like you." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She was taken aback. The words she had heard from her boss earlier in the day, the criticisms that had felt like sharp knives, now seemed to be turning into something else entirely. This stranger, this man who she had never met, was seeing something in her that no one at the office had ever bothered to notice, something that made her feel both seen and valued for the first time in a long while. "So, you're saying you want to hire me?" she asked, still trying to wrap her mind around it all. Daniel nodded, his expression serious. "I want to offer you a chance to join us, not as another cog in the wheel, but as someone who can contribute in a way that feels authentic to you. What you have is exactly what we need." Maya felt a wave of emotions wash over her: relief, confusion, hope, but most of all, something she hadn't felt in years, a spark of excitement. For the first time today, she felt like things might just turn out okay. Maya stood there for a few moments, her mind racing, still processing Daniel's words. The bustling sounds of the city outside the office seemed so distant, as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. Her fingers curled around the strap of her bag, And for the first time that day, she didn't feel the usual weight of emptiness dragging her down. There was a strange sense of possibility in the air, but it was also overwhelming. Daniel watched her closely, waiting for her to respond, his expression a mix of patience and understanding. He seemed to sense her internal battle, the tug between her past experiences, the fear of stepping into something unknown, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to break free from the suffocating expectations she'd been trying to live up to. "Maya, I know this is a lot to take in," Daniel said gently, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "I didn't expect you to make a decision right here and now, but I wanted you to know that the door is open. You don't have to conform to what others think of you. Your silence isn't a weakness, it's a strength. And that's what we need." Maya looked up at him, his words settling deep in her heart. He wasn't just offering her a job, he was offering her an escape from the very thing that had been holding her back for so long. He was offering her a chance to do things on her own terms, to use her natural quietude as an asset, not something that needed to be fixed. For so long, Maya had doubted herself. Her quiet nature had often been seen as a flaw, a reason for her to be overlooked and underestimated. She'd believed that in order to succeed, she had to change, to become louder, more outgoing, more like the people around her who seemed to thrive in the spotlight. But hearing Daniel's words now, something in her began to shift. What if she didn't have to change? What if she could succeed precisely because of the qualities that made her unique? The memory of her firing rushed back, and for a moment, she could almost hear Angela's sharp voice echoing in her mind. "You're just too quiet. Maya, you need to speak up more. Be more engaged." It was a criticism that had stung deeply, one that had made her question whether she would ever find a place in the world where her quietness wasn't a burden. But Daniel's words were different. They weren't about fixing her. They were about embracing who she was. He saw her potential, not as something that needed to be molded into someone else's idea of success, but as something raw, untapped, and powerful. I don't know what to say," Maya admitted, her voice quieter than usual, but with a steadiness she hadn't felt in a long time. "This is all so sudden. I've just been fired, and now, it feels like everything is changing so fast." "I understand," Daniel replied, his tone still warm and reassuring. "It's a big decision, but sometimes the biggest opportunities come when you least expect them. I know what it's like to feel like you don't fit into the mold. I've been there. But trust me, Maya, you don't have to change who you are to succeed. We'll give you the space to grow, to make your own mark. No pressure, just your skills, your quiet strength, and the chance to be the person you were meant to be." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't want to cry, but the emotion was bubbling up inside her, threatening to overflow. She had spent so many years doubting herself, trying to fit into a world that didn't seem to understand her. But now, here was someone telling her that it was okay to be exactly who she was. For the first time in years, Maya felt seen not for her ability to speak up or be loud, but for the quiet, thoughtful way she approached the world. For the first time, her silence didn't feel like something to apologize for. She took a deep breath, her decision slowly becoming clear. There was a part of her that wanted to run, to retreat into the comfort of her old life, the one where she stayed hidden and out of sight. But there was another part of her, the part that had been slowly awakening in the past few moments, that realized this was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. The chance to step out of the shadows, to take control of her own path, and to finally stop pretending to be someone she wasn't. "All right," Maya said, her voice strong now, despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "I'll do it. I'll join your company. But I need to know one thing first." Daniel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Of course. What's that?" Maya met his gaze with newfound determination. "I need to be sure that when I join, I'll be allowed to work in my own way. I need to be sure that my silence won't ever be seen as a weakness again." Daniel's smile returned, even wider than before. "Maya, I'm not asking you to change a thing. You'll work in your own way, at your own pace. This is your opportunity to take the lead on your own terms." A weight lifted from Maya's chest. She had made her decision. It wasn't just about a job. It was about reclaiming her power, her voice quiet as it was, and using it to build something meaningful. For the first time, in what felt like forever, Maya felt ready. Ready to take a chance, ready to trust herself, and ready to step into a future that felt completely her own. The days following Maya's decision were a blur of new beginnings. She'd left behind her old job, the office where she had spent years struggling to fit into a mold that wasn't hers, and stepped into a world that felt unfamiliar, but strangely welcoming. Her first day at Daniel's company was nothing like she had imagined. Gone were the cold, impersonal meetings, replaced with small, collaborative team discussions that valued input from everyone, no matter how quiet or outspoken they were. Maya was surprised by the amount of space she was given to work on her own terms. She had expected to be shadowed at first, perhaps eased into the role, but Daniel's approach was different. He trusted her immediately, offering her the autonomy to tackle projects in her own way. The team was small, but supportive, a stark contrast to the corporate environment she had left behind. Everyone seemed genuinely invested in each other's success, and Maya felt for the first time that her quiet nature was not just accepted, but appreciated. In the first week, Maya found herself collaborating on a project that involved creating a detailed analysis of market trends for a potential client. She had always been skilled at research, but in her old job, her work had often been overshadowed by louder, more aggressive voices. Here, her insights were listened to, and her careful attention to detail was recognized as a key asset. She found herself contributing ideas that were not only welcomed but implemented. The work felt meaningful, and she was no longer just a silent observer in meetings. She was a contributor, a valued team member. But the true shift came when Maya was invited to a team brainstorming session, something she never would have been asked to participate in at her old job. In the past, she had always been too quiet to speak up in these settings. But here, Daniel had a way of making everyone feel heard, no matter their speaking style. Maya took a deep breath, gathering the courage to share an idea that had been brewing in her mind for a few days. When she spoke, her voice was steady, not the hesitant murmur it used to be, but a confident, clear statement of her thoughts. To her surprise, the room fell silent for a moment. Then, Daniel smiled and nodded. "That's a brilliant point. Maya, we should explore that further." Maya's heart raced, but in a good way. She had always feared speaking up in groups, terrified that her ideas would be dismissed or ridiculed, but here, her voice mattered. She was heard. She realized that it wasn't just her quietness that had made her feel out of place in her old job. It was the lack of a culture that truly valued her perspective. In this new space, Maya's voice, though still soft, had power. As the weeks went by, Maya's confidence continued to grow. She began to take on more responsibility, leading small teams, and even mentoring some of the newer employees. The company felt like a true community, a place where she could thrive as herself. Her quiet nature was no longer something she had to hide or apologize for. It was her strength, a unique asset that set her apart from others. She realized she no longer had to pretend to be someone she wasn't. In fact, being herself was exactly what had made her successful in this new environment. One afternoon, as she sat in her new office, looking out the window at the city below, Maya felt a sense of peace wash over her. She thought about everything that had led her to this point, the doubts, the fears, the firing that had once seemed like the end of the world. In reality, it had been the beginning of something much greater. Maya knew there would still be challenges ahead, but for the first time, she felt ready to face them. She had found a place where she could be herself, a place where silence wasn't a flaw, but a force. And as the weeks turned into months, she continued to grow, not just professionally, but personally. Maya had found her voice, not in the loud, boisterous way she had once imagined, but in her own quiet, thoughtful manner. And that was enough. She smiled to herself, knowing that this was only the beginning. The future, once uncertain and clouded with doubt, now felt full of possibility. Maya was no longer just a quiet employee. She was a confident, valued member of a team, ready to take on whatever came next.